Good morning, folks. I'm glad you're able to join us as we meet together here in my living room, but for our Berean Baptist Church adult Sunday school class. Having a great time together, although I'd rather us actually be together, and maybe by July. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? We used to have a sport in Canada called baseball. That's all done for a little while anyway, but just kidding. But we had, used to have two teams in Canada, Montreal and one in Toronto. And there was a player that played for Montreal for, I believe, about 11 years. His name was Andre Dawson. And when he went from Montreal rather to Chicago, and he played for the Cubs there. And like a lot of baseball players, didn't like necessarily being called out on strikes. And there was an instance once where he got called out on strikes and he argued with the umpire, and at any rate, he ended up getting a fine, and he had to pay $1,000 for this fine for arguing with the umpire. So he wrote out a check, and he wrote the check out to the MLB, and he put in the little note section there, wrote $1,000 check, and in the note section he put donation for the blind, not wanting to admit that he actually struck out. But you know, it's kind of funny, you know, when people want to get back at somebody else, all right? And that was his little shot at vengeance there against the umpire. Joe West was the umpire's name. But another neat example that I was reading about, Abraham Lincoln, as you know, was a president of the United States, and he was a God-fearing man from everything that I've been able to ascertain in reading. But before he became president of the United States, he was an attorney. And a certain man came to him, and he said, you know, there's this man that owes him $2.50. And he, from owing that money, he wanted to put a claim in and take this guy to court for $2.50. And the man was poor. He owed him the money, but he was just after him. And Abraham Lincoln, who wasn't President Lincoln at that time, he tried to dissuade the man of taking this guy to court, and the man would have nothing about it. This guy owes me $2.50. He is going to pay me $2.50. So Mr. Lincoln says, all right, well, you know, for your legal fees, it's going to cost you $10. The man said, that's fine, and he paid him $10. Abraham Lincoln went to the man that owed the fella $2.50 and gave him half of it. He says, here's $5, pay the guy back the $2.50 that he owes. And when he took the money, he was happy to admit that he was wrong and that he owed the guy the money, and he paid him $2.50 back. He profited $2.50, Abraham Lincoln profited $5, and the plaintiff, the guy who was making the complaints, was satisfied with this judgment. It shows what revenge just takes over, all right? And it makes no sense what this guy did. It cost him $10 to get $2.50 back, and the guy that owed him the money walked away with an extra $2.50. But revenge, you know, and payback always looks alluring to us. It seems bred into us, and I guess it is with us, the sin nature that we have, that, you know, we want to not only see the bad guy lose, but we want to see him humiliated as well, you know. And aside from the passage that we're going to look at this morning, aside from when Jesus said in Luke chapter 23 and verse 34, while they were crucifying him, it says, then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. Aside from that instance, and possibly the instance of Stephen, my namesake, for when he was being stoned by these religious men, these priests and Pharisees and so forth, that were stoning him for what he was saying, that you guys crucified Jesus. He was the Messiah. And as they were crucifying him, it says there in Acts chapter 7 and verse 60, it says, and he kneeled down and cried with a loud voice, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep, or he was knocked unconscious, and then they continued to stone him until he died. You know, this, aside from those two examples, which I think are probably a little more pointed towards that, this next one here that we're going to look at in 2 Kings in chapter 6 may be one of the clearest examples in the Bible, and it's fairly extensive, so we're going to get to look at it a little bit in depth. but one of the clearest examples of someone not seeking revenge, okay? Not seeking revenge. You know, it also may be one of the best life examples that we see in the Bible of Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 1, which says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." A soft answer turneth away wrath. And that's what we're going to have a look at here, all right? In the early 70s, speaking of presidents, excuse me a second here, President Nixon, as you can remember, probably many of you can remember, there was a big scandal called the Watergate scandal. And President Nixon was the only U.S. president who ever resigned from his office because of this scandal. And there was other things that happened during this scandal, but one of the things was there was illegal activities where they were bugging the offices of political opponents that he had, all right? And it resulted in him, having to resign. But you know, bugging people's offices, this was not the earliest example. The earliest example of this we can find in 2 Kings chapter 6, all right? The king of Syria had a number of times tried to do some surprise attacks on Israel, and he got his troops together and they would sneak in there, but before they got there, Elisha would go to the king, Jehoram, and he would tell him, there is going to be an attack at this place, at this time. You need to get your men out of there, and you need to get out of there. All right, and it happened at least 3 times. Once you take your Bibles, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 10. And it may have happened many more than 3 times, okay? But it says, "And the king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God told him and warned him of, and saved himself there, not once nor twice." Okay, so it's at least 3 times where he was saved from this thing. And the king of Syria, it was obvious to him that there's no way that the king of Israel could know about these attacks and be prepared and be vacated from that area, or somehow rather that he was obviously tipped off, and he assumed that he had to have some men in his army that were traitors and that were saying all these things, you know, and passing on the information to the enemy. And he goes and he wants to find out who that is. Take a look in verse number 11. It says, "Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing, and he called his servants and said unto them, Will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Who is the traitor? And one of his servants said, None, my lord, but your office is bugged." Essentially, all right? He says, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet that is in Israel, telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber." No matter where you go to hide, Elisha tells him what you said, all right? And, you know, what amazes me about this, other than the fact that this is happening and Elisha's tipping him off, it seems kind of neat that somebody recognizes who is the one that's tipping him off, that it's Elisha. You wonder if it goes back to something that Naaman has said, all right? And maybe Naaman at this point is actually witnessing to some of these other soldiers or something here. I mean, he got to bring the gospel back, or he got to bring who God was back. And I'm sure he talked a lot with his little servant girl that he had in his household about who God was and so forth. But these people knew this. But what amazes me is that Elisha was able to tell Jehoram at least 3 times of attacks. Clearly, the offices of the king of Syria weren't bugged, but it was God who can hear everything. He knows all our thoughts. He knows what we say. He's passing this on to Elisha, and Elisha's passing it on to Jehoram. But why is Elisha passing this on? Why is God doing this and giving this to Elisha? What is Jehoram? He is a vile, wicked king. His mother is Jezebel. His father, Ahab. And yet, there is God passing on these warnings to him and to his people, okay? And most, aside from just having the wicked king, most of the people, most of the northern kingdom of Israel were unfaithful to God at all. And they worshiped idols, and they did all kinds of these other things, but God, okay? Yet God is there. Why was he telling them? Was it for the benefit of, there was some faithful there. Elisha lived there, and there were some faithful, but they were drastically outnumbered by the unfaithful. Was God just providing a way of escape for those few faithful? That's possible. Or was it more just his mercy to prove to these unfaithful how trustworthy God is, and for those unfaithful people to turn back to him? It may be a little of both, or it may be something else, but what it does show us is that it demonstrates God's mercy and God's grace to these people who don't deserve it. You know, what does God do for us that we absolutely don't deserve? You know, it would do our hearts good if we were to sit back sometimes and just turn off the TV, turn off the internet. Don't turn this off yet till we're done. But turn off all the outside influences and just think honestly before God. What is God doing for me that I don't deserve? We can see here that God is protecting Israel. There is chosen people, but his chosen people have forsaken him. But here he is warning them ahead of time so that these soldiers don't die, and so the king doesn't die. And this king is evil and vile. And yet God continues to give him chance after chance to turn to him. And he continues to give the people of Israel chance after chance to turn back to him. All right? But how many times does God do things for us that we simply don't deserve? It would do us good to take stock of some of those things. But here we see this king, and I want you to think how foolish the world can be here, okay? He says, let's send some spies to find out where Elisha is, and then we can go and we can catch him. His whole theory is if we get rid of Elisha, then he can't pass his words on to the king. But think about this. If God is speaking to Elisha, would not God tell Elisha that the king's plans are to do to him? Think about it. All right? But it doesn't matter. This guy is just, he's not thinking straight because sin blinds us. All right? So he finds out where he is, okay? And he's in a place called Dothan. Interesting, this little place called Dothan. It's only mentioned one other time in Scripture. If you remember, it was when Joseph, I know there's many Josephs in the Bible, but Joseph, coat of many colors, that's where he went to find his brothers, all right? And we know the story of what happened to Joseph after that, but the only other mention of Dothan is there with Joseph, all right, and going to find his brothers. And right here where they find that Elisha is in this place called Dothan. Now, he would travel around to different places and to do his ministry and so forth. And the king of Syria, he puts together, this is not a small band of men that he puts together here. He puts a huge bunch of people together. Look at verse number 14. It says, therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. And they circled the city. So in the morning, as the morning light comes, there is soldiers all around this city where they are. And Elisha's servant that he had, it was no longer Gehazi. He had been smitten with leprosy when he lied to Naaman, and lied to Elisha about what Naaman had said, and tried to get that extra money and so forth. But it's not Gehazi anymore. It's another servant. He doesn't give us his name, but he goes out early in the morning and he looks and he sees all of these horses and chariots and soldiers all around the city. And he goes into a panic, as probably many of us would do, okay? But as he does this, he is afraid because he believes it's clear to his eyes. We're outnumbered, all right? And they're coming for us here, okay? It would have been good if he'd have learned some of the things from David and some of the writings from David in this time, which clearly Elisha was much like David, as we'll see in a moment here. In Psalm chapter 3, verse 6, David says, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. That sounds pretty bold, doesn't it? In Psalm chapter 27 and verse 3, he says, though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. What's he confident in? Is this bravery of David? I say it's not bravery. What this is trust. Trust in God. That's what it is. It's not bravery. It sounds brave, but it's simply trusting, knowing that God has his back here, okay? And we see that the reaction that this young servant of Elisha that he has here in the last part of verse 15 here in 2 Kings chapter 6, he says, alas, master, what shall we do? Okay? What shall we do? What shall we do? You know why Elisha wasn't afraid? Because he wasn't going to do anything. God has it. God has it all in control. You know, I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to, if we're going somewhere in the car, I want to be the one that drives. That's just the way it is. All right. If I've got a car, I would prefer the car to be a standard as opposed to an automatic. I have more control over a standard, especially in the snow. You have more control over the standard. You know, you're not getting pushed through stop signs when the back wheels are still turning and the front wheels are locking up. You get the clutch there, and it's just better. All right. In my eyes, it's better. You know, if something's broken, I want to be the one that fixes it. Then I know what has happened and what's there. You know, but sometimes I need to let go and let God. Let go of things, let go of the controls, and let God have it. And that's what Elisha is willing to do here. The servant says, what shall we do? Elisha says, we're not going to do anything. God has got this. Elisha was way, way better at this than I am. Okay. We see in Romans chapter 8 in verse 31, it says, what shall we say then to these things? If God be for us, can you finish it? Who can be against us? If God's on my side, what do I have to worry about? What do I have to worry about if I know God is on my side? Okay. I want you to see something here with Elisha, all right? What Elisha does, this young man comes in, and he hasn't been walking with the Lord nearly as long as Elisha has, all right? And he comes in, and he is genuinely scared, like probably all of us would be, when these soldiers are there, and their chariots are there, and their weapons are there, all right? And he sees that they're outnumbered and everything, all right? But I want to show you what Elisha does, okay? Elisha says, yeah, there's lots of people out there. But the fact is, we have them outnumbered. We have them outnumbered? Look at verse 16. It says there in verse 16, it says, and he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And then he prays for this young man. He prays that he would open his eye, that God would open his eyes so that he could see what was really there. What was really there. Look at the end of verse 17. It says, and the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. They were there, okay? And here's Elisha praying for this man, okay? Those who are strong in the faith need to be compassionate with those whose faith is weaker, okay? It's called edifying. It's called building up. And he just didn't say, well, you need to trust God, and he's got all this. He says, he prayed for this young man. He didn't just tell him, it's going to be okay. No, he didn't do that. He prayed for this young man that he could see what was really there, okay? They were really there. It wasn't a vision of these horses and chariots of fire. No, they were really there. The spirit world is a real world, all right? And it's there, even though we can't see it. Elisha was fully aware of it, okay? And he fully trusted God here. And he wanted this young man to see this too, It's interesting too that we see here that Elisha just doesn't ask for God to take these soldiers and to wipe out all these other soldiers, to take all these angels that are in fiery chariots and horses, okay, and to wipe all these other guys out, all right? What were these soldiers there to do? These soldiers were there for the express purpose of capturing Elisha and taking him back to Syria, okay? But that's not what he's after, okay? What would Elisha do? If Elisha was to seek revenge on these guys and kill them, he's not going to do it himself, but if he were to pray to ask God to kill these guys, what would in essence happen? Think about it. What happened when the king sent the people for Elijah, and he sent a captain with his 50, and Elijah called down fire from heaven and killed all those guys, those 51 men, the captain and his 50 men. What did the king do? He sent more. And those guys died. And he sent more. All right? If Elisha prays for these soldiers that have the city surrounded, that God will wipe them out, the king of Syria is just going to send more. All he's doing is delaying, okay? That revenge is not going to accomplish anything, okay? So what Elisha does is, just like he asked God to open the eyes of his servant so that he could see what was really there, he prays and asks God that he would blind the eyes of these Syrian soldiers so that they could not see what was really there. And he goes to these men, okay? And they don't recognize where they're at. They don't recognize who he is, all right? And, you know, Satan uses this in the same way, but in a malicious intent, in that he blinds the eyes of mankind as to what sin really is. He makes people look at sin and they think the sin is freedom. Sin is not freedom. Sin is bondage. People are bound by that sin. Not just people. I am bound. You are bound. If we give ourselves over to that sin, it holds us. All right. And Satan, he defeats people, or he weakens people by making them see what's not really, by not letting them see what sin really is. Okay. They think it's freedom. They think it's pleasure. This is just enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Okay. It's only for a short time, and then it's worse afterwards. Or this sin, and he makes them think that they can profit by that sin. That's what Satan does, and he blinds the eyes of people, all right? But what Elisha does here is he goes to those men, and God blinds their eyes. I don't think that they were physically blind where they were walking around and they can't see anything, okay? I think they were blind like they could not see what was really there, just like that his young man could not see those soldiers outside with the flaming chariots of fire, what was really there. He couldn't see that with his regular eyes, okay? And these men here, they were blinded to what was really there, okay? And we'll see that as we carry on with this biblical account here. He says, I'll take you and show you the man who you want to see, okay? But we need to go. You need to follow me. And they follow him from Dothan to Samaria, and that's about 11 miles, okay? So that'd be like 17, 18 kilometers, something along that neighborhood. And he takes these soldiers there, and he's leading these soldiers. And I want you to imagine this, as they get to Samaria, as they get to Samaria, the guards are there, and they see Elisha coming with all these soldiers, and they open the gates for him, and he comes into Samaria, and he brings them right in. This is the king's city, okay? This is where the king is, all right? And he opens these gates. Now, I want you to, when Elisha finally says, okay, Lord, open their eyes so they can see where they really are. They can see what's really here. Can you imagine the look on these guys' face, for one thing? But can you imagine the fear that came into them when they opened their eyes and they are in Samaria, okay? Uh-oh. Now we're outnumbered, all right? And they find themselves there, and we see that he brings in, and the king is there, Jehoram is there, and look at Jehoram's response there in verse number 21. He says, and the king of Israel said unto Elijah when he saw them, and he gives him some respect here when he calls him my father, okay? But he says, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? Okay? It says the second time, you know what he wants to do? He wants to kill these guys. All right? He wants to kill them all. And Elisha says, whoa, 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 wait a minute. If you capture men with your bow and your spear and you bring these guys, that you're prisoners of war. Once you've captured them all to bring them in, do you kill them? He says, no, no, no. And you see, Elisha had captured all these guys. Well, God had done it, but he brought Elisha in there without a sword, without a spear, without a shield, without anything. And he brings his whole army into Samaria. And Elisha says, no, I want you to feed them. Give them bread, give them water. And it tells us there in the last verse there, in verse 23, it says, and he prepared great provision for them. And when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. All right, and he provided probably more than, it sounds to me when he gives them great provision, that he went above and beyond what Elisha said there of just some bread and water. He says, feed these guys well, all right? Now, doesn't that seem like a totally bizarre way to treat an army that has come to capture you? To take you away, maybe to kill you, to at least imprison you? But that's what Elisha did. You know, Solomon wrote in the book of Proverbs, chapter 25 and verse 21, he says, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. It's exactly what Elisha told them to do. Give them bread and water. All right? In Exodus chapter 23, it talks about if you find an enemy's ox, these are their power, this is their tractor, okay? And if you find the ox just wandering through the field somewhere else, you know what you do that ox? You stop what you're doing, you take the ox and you bring it, lead it back to his master, even though that person is your enemy. You bring him back to him, okay? Romans chapter 12, verse 21 tells us, be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. You know, I read this quote by someone, and it says, the most glorious victory over an enemy is to turn him into a friend. You know what Jesus had to say on this subject? In Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 and 44, he said, ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, you know, it's neat all those different times when Jesus says, this is what you heard, but this is the truth. This is what's real, okay? But I say unto you, love your enemies. Ouch, that hurts. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. How can you pray for someone that hates you and goes out of their way to hurt you? How can you pray for that person? With God's help. That's how. With God's help. You can't do that on your own. You can't. The servant cried, how shall we do? What are we going to do? Elisha said, we're not going to do anything. We're going to do things God's way, and we're going to let God do this, okay? How many times do we take the steering wheel and do it our way, when in truth, they that be with us are more than they that be with them? In our righteous indignation, we want to expose people for who they are to vindicate ourselves. But I got news for you. That's God's job. That's not our job. And when we try to do God's job, we can't do God's job. We can't. All right? Romans 12:19. I just read Romans 12:21. But Romans 12:19, the end of that verse, very familiar. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. What? I will repay. I don't need your help here. Okay? This is up to me. I will repay. Because you are my child, so I will protect you. Okay? We don't need to exact that vengeance on someone else. It's like a little kid and a father. The father is the one that protects the child. Okay? The little child doesn't have to run out there and do something here. And it's the same with us. We're the little children, and God is the Father, and He says, it's my job. Don't take my job. You leave that to me, okay? What Elisha actually did here with these men was he saved their lives. He did. He brought them into Samaria. They could have been easily wiped out there. And he said, no, 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 no. You don't kill these people. They're my prisoners of war. What you need to do is you need to feed them, and you need to send them on their way. And what did these men see? These men got to see God's mercy in action. God's mercy in action. What do you think they thought of Elisha when they safely left Samaria with a full stomach? These enemies, they were treated in a way like Jesus said, like Solomon said, a soft answer turneth away wrath. It's not easy to do when someone goes out of their way to hurt us, someone goes out of their way to say lies about us, or someone goes out of their way to just to hurt us in any way they can. And what's God say we need to do? Expose them for who they are? No. Pray for those that despitefully use you and persecute you. And we can't do that on our own. We can't do that on our own. But that's what we need to do. We need to trust God. We need to trust God. Just like Stephen, just a man, as they are stoning him, saying, lay not this sin to their charge. Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. What does that take? It takes fellowship with God. That takes a commitment to let God do the things that he wants to do. Let God do his job. And we need to do our job and to help and to edify one another, to build one another up, and to live lives that give examples to others that's totally contrary to our nature. But to love our enemies and bless them that persecute us. Do good to them that despitefully use us. That's what God wants us to do. And we can't do that on our own. We have to trust him.